Hello, everybody, and welcome to Julie's Unknown Podcast. Today, I have Dani here with me, who is a breathwork facilitator. She is a sacred channel and also student of the plants. I am so excited to have her here on this podcast because I've dabbled in breathwork myself. I don't know the full in depth of everything, but I have had sessions. They've been impactful for me and my healing journey. And I'm so excited to have her here to explain a little bit deeper about her journey to how breathwork actually is there to help us heal and let go, like in a physical way, but also emotional and spiritual. And so, Dani, welcome to the show. And can you please tell me a little bit of how did you get into all of this? How did this all find you?
Julie, thank you so much for having me today. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited to have a conversation on this. And yeah, I can just start maybe sharing a little bit about my personal journey. I was actually in my senior year of college when I found breath work. And at that time, I had kind of began diving into healing work, developing my channel. Like my channel opened, I was receiving a lot of information. My beliefs were already shifting. I was seeing the world in a new way. And I was invited to a breathwork ceremony in my hometown. And I felt the calling to go. And I went. And what happened was so amazing. I really had such a profound experience, so much so that at the time I was planning on going to medical school after college, and I let go of that dream. And I was like, actually, this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, this is the answer. Like, this is mind, body, spirit, emotional healing that we really, really need, that a lot of the medical field doesn't cover. Like, all those different areas of where these different diseases and illnesses can manifest. So I felt like, oh my gosh, this is the answer. And yeah, essentially, I felt like I had received like years of therapy within an hour, within one session, and I had come so deeply into my body more than I ever had. Yeah, that's really what I was looking for. So I was like, yeah, this is really what I want to share with the world and bring to other people, and this is so important. So that's kind of how it found me. And then I went down to Costa Rica after I graduated to start my training, and that was also just so transformative and profound. And of course, before you're becoming a facilitator, you're going through the process of the healing yourself so that you know how to hold space for other people. So the training itself really changed my life in a deep way. It changed me inside, and then because of that, like externally, my life shifted in a big way. And that's a really beautiful thing about breathwork is it can go so deep into our belief systems, our past traumas, like the things that are really holding us back from living the life and creating the life that we know we're here to live and create. So I really experienced that firsthand. It really shifted everything for me.
I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that story. It's really interesting that how it found you at a time where you were almost in a fork in the road. You're like, oh, I'm thinking medical school. And then it was like, it's like the universe was like, nope, nope, nope. We need to change her mind now.
Yes, exactly. Divine intervention.
I love that you mentioned that about the medical field. Like it does. I believe it has its place for certain things, but I do also believe that we emotionally and, like we manifest our own illnesses and to
Hmm.
go back and use the body, the breath work, the healing, the mindset, all of these, because they're all intertwined to truly
Totally.
heal not only the physical body but the emotional body is key. And it would be really, honestly, it would be really nice if like that can become a little bit more mainstream. And again, medical system has its place for certain things, and I do believe for certain things it is really good and beneficial. But if we can bring a little bit more of that holistic, that spiritual practice, I believe it
Hmm.
will have such a big impact to everybody's health. So can you like speak a little bit about how breath work can on a health level, on a physical level, really help people?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I totally agree with everything you're sharing and I love it because it does have its place, but I think a lot of times we are maybe putting a band-aid over things or symptoms are being treated rather than the root cause of whatever is showing up in our body. So I'll speak a little bit how breathwork kind of helps us get to the root. Because, like you said, physically, these illnesses or diseases or symptoms or things are manifested initially on a spiritual, mental, emotional level. So, through these sessions, through breathing in a conscious and connected way, we're activating and able to access the subconscious mind, which is really incredible. Excuse me. So we're changing the brain waves in the brain and we're able to look at things from a different perspective. So a lot of times when we are creating an illness in the body, it's often due to like a trauma that we had, something emotional that happened, something that we haven't been able to resolve within ourselves or in our mind. So when we're activating and accessing the subconscious mind, we can begin to access those memories. Also, not just in the mind, but physically in the body, through the breath. Those cellular memories are brought to the surface and we are remembering, we are processing them, re-experiencing them, hopefully for the last time. So it's like we're releasing them. So in that sense, we're able to really see like, oh, this is the belief that has been creating this situation or this emotional response in my body that has then been creating this physical response in my body. So like you said, it's all interconnected. So it's really about getting to the root. And yeah, that's actually one of the processes that we do in our training is looking at why have I created or manifested this like illness. And one of the things we look at too is what are we getting out of it? Because a lot of times, even though we are creating something that maybe seems unwanted in our life, there's also a payoff for it. So that's something interesting to look at as well. If I am feeling, like really tired all the time or really sick, what am I getting out of it? Oh, I'm getting what I'm getting out of it is I don't have to show up to this thing or this event or my work that I have fear around. So like a part of me doesn't want to show up. So, oh, if I'm sick, I don't have to. It's like an easy out. So we really begin to look at these like really deep subconscious programmings that are running the life so that we can be healthy and whole and really showing up how we need to. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I fully resonate with all of that. Because like even I know like when I've done a few breathwork sessions prior to that, I was ready, like diving deep. I was doing a lot of inner child healing and shadow work myself, which was really going to the root cause. And it wasn't because there was any current physically happening. It was just more, it
Mhm.
was that time where I was being guided to be like, okay, you need to look at some things. And when I did those, I think it was like two, three sessions in, I would say like a shorter period of time, like a month and a half, 2 months, because it was with the facilitator who was doing her training. And so she needed people to practice on. And I was just at that point, I'm like, well, I don't know anything about breath work, so let's do this. And it wasn't what I was expecting. Like, I
Mhm.
think what initially I thought I was expecting, and I know there's different levels, there's different types of breath work as well. So for all those who are listening, there is so many different breathing exercises, breath work. But this one in particular, I thought it was going to be more the yoga meditation vibe. But then all
Yeah.
of a sudden she puts this like upbeat music. And I was like, oh,
Yes.
this is a thing. And it was like a dance, like it was like kind of like trance dance kind of like not clubbing but a different, like it was a more upbeat, and then she's
Yeah.
guiding me, and it was so interesting because each of those 3 sessions, physically, I've had different symptoms come up. And I think that one of them was, it was definitely like of shaking. There was a lot of
Yeah.
shaking. And then there was definitely the claw thing with the hands, like your hands tensing up. And I think there was crying in another one, but each one was different. It was not the same. So it was really interesting to explore that. And then after that, I felt like vibrating. Like my body was just vibrating after that. And I just
Yes.
needed a moment to come back to earth. Can you explain a little bit about those experiences?
Yeah, I love that you're bringing this in, and I love that you just said like it took me time to come back to Earth because that really is such like a sweet space I love to hold to welcome people back to because you journey. You really do go on a journey. Sometimes these sessions are, almost as powerful as like plant medicine or psychedelics, but it's like in a gentle way, which is amazing for people who, maybe don't have access or physically can't do those things. The shaking is, well, first I want to say with all of these things, it's amazing because we get to really learn how to trust our bodies and the wisdom of our bodies. Our bodies know how to heal when we put ourselves in the correct environment and when we breathe deep like this. So I always tell people like trust where your breath is taking you, trust what your body is doing. Like it knows how to heal, you know how to heal. And now you're dropping into the space to do so. So with the shaking, it's actually such an intelligent response of the body. It's how we release trauma. And if you watch like an animal who is maybe like gets attacked or something, afterwards it'll shake, but then it will be done with it. And it automatically releases that energy and that fear and that adrenaline from the body. And as humans, oftentimes we go through things in our lives that are traumatic, that are shocking, that are scary, that are challenging, and we hold on to those memories in the cells of our body, and they continue to affect our lives because it's in our body, we're replaying it, we're still feeling it, we haven't released it yet. So when we breathe in this way and the body shakes or it vibrates, that's your body releasing those memories and that energy that had been ignited in your body from whatever that experience was from the cells of your being so that you can, have more space in your body for love, for peace, for who you truly are, rather than what had happened to you. So the shaking is a really, really beautiful and powerful response. And yeah, I mean, I've had clients that just like shake the whole time, and I'm like, it's so perfect, trust the body, and it's creating more space, for you to be all the way here. And with the lobster hands, the crab hands, that's a
It
really
was
interesting
so
one.
weird. It's so weird, but my facilitator gave me a heads up about it. So I was prepared for like if it were to come up and it came up like once and I was like, whoa. And it's weird because you can't move like in that moment. You're so deep
Mm.
in the breath work, you're so deep in that meditation state that you can't relax that. Like it stays like that until
Hmm.
you're done and you come back to. So it's interesting being in that state and being like, I have no control over this.
Yeah, I remember my first breathwork section session actually, like my hands were totally lobster claws, and the facilitator came up and he was making a joke with me afterwards, and he was like, "Well, they're just gonna stay that way now," and I was like, "What?" But yeah. So there's a couple of things that can be happening there. One of them being, it tends to happen when we are forcing the exhale. If we're forcing the exhale, the hands will lock up. So a lot of times I tell people, if you are getting the crab hands, try to allow the exhale to be more natural, and be more of like a letting go than like a pushing out. Which is another point I'll just make very quickly is that through this process of breathing consciously, we get to understand a lot about how we are living. Like when people are really forcing their exhale, a lot of times there's a pattern in the life of I have to force myself through things, I have to push really hard, I have to try really hard. And if we're having trouble receiving the breath, there's usually a pattern of like it's not safe to receive, I can't fully be here. So there's all these little things that as a facilitator we're watching for and we're noticing, and it helps us, take the person deeper and unravel some things and come back home to again who they truly are. And then also with the crab hands, it's really interesting because it can also symbolize that we're holding on to something. If you think about it, having your hands totally locked up in this weird, awkward way, there is energy oftentimes that is stuck there. Like we're holding on to something in our life, whether it be energetically or mentally, a situation, a person, and it's showing up in the hands, like we talked about before, like how those things in the mind show up in the body. So I've also seen in really powerful moments, asking a person, is there something you're holding on to? And once they identify it, the hands open and then the energy is released, which is really quite amazing. And then there's usually, tears and crying and other releases happening as well. But yeah, it can be a really beautiful process.
Interesting. I love that you shared all of that because it makes sense, but it's something, I mean, I'm not a breathwork facilitator, so I wouldn't pick up on those things, but a simple of like how someone actually is doing the breath work in the moment shares so much wisdom of what's going on. You know what,
Yeah.
like you said, whether how they are inhaling, how they are exhaling, what's happening physically, it tells a story of where they're at, whether they are actually releasing, letting go, whether they are still holding on to things. So I think that that is beautiful that it gives more, I guess, signposts to dive deeper. It gives more signposts to kind of see like what else is there. Because I think that this is also with any modality. Like it's not like, oh, you do a breathwork session and then that's it. All your things are healed, right?
Right.
It's not the Band-Aid solution. It's a journey. Like I
Yeah.
said, I did three in a short span of time. In that moment, that was what was being called for me. And then I've done a few other ones like later on down the road. But it's not just like you do it once and it's like, okay, you've healed that. And I think
Mhm.
so part of us wants, our ego wants that. Our ego wants to be like, okay, like I did the inner work and then now this section of me is healed. But it's not like that because I've done breathwork sessions and then, I kind of come back 6 months later and the same pattern repeats itself, the same trigger comes up. It's different. It's not
Mhm.
saying it's the same exact how I normally would have reacted or handled the situation. It's different, but it's still there, meaning there's something more to that.
Totally. Yeah. And I love that you're sharing that because healing really is a journey and it can be a spiral too, is something I've really been experiencing lately. And this is what I see a lot in the breathwork too. The breathwork, like I said, activates the subconscious mind. We see these patterns, these beliefs, these things playing out in our life, how we're contributing to the creation of them. So then we have that awareness and we have the ability to shift the story, right? But also sometimes we come back around the spiral with this new awareness and we see the pattern again, but the difference is we're not caught up in it unconsciously. Like we're looking at it from a place of awareness so that we don't have to be necessarily like stuck in it, feeding it, continuing to play it out. We have hopefully by now like the skills and the tools to see it happening, like pause, write a new story, choose a new way, love ourselves in that moment. If we are falling back into old things and just have compassion for our humanity because we are so human, and we have to embrace that. And one thing my teacher always shared that I loved so much was there's nothing to fix or get rid of. There's everything to embrace in your love. So I think that's really what it's about, like letting these things come home and be loved and um, when they are loved and seen in the light of consciousness, that's when they really begin to shift. Not when we shame ourselves or try to be different or like, make ourselves wrong, but when when we love and accept ourselves, no matter what's happening. I think that's so
Yeah.
important.
I love that you shared that because that is one thing I tell myself, I tell my clients is like, because they'll come to me and they're like, oh, like I got triggered again. I did the same thing. I repeated the pattern. I'm like, okay, yeah, the
Mhm.
difference is now you know. You recognize
Yes.
it. And I'm like, that's what's huge. It's like you're not unconsciously doing it, you're consciously aware. So even though you may have reacted the same way, even though you
Mhm.
may have repeated the pattern full circle, you were
Mhm.
aware that what was happening. And so then it's like that's one step. And then the next step would be when it starts happening again, how now you'll see it coming. You'll maybe react a little bit
Mhm.
differently, or maybe you'll react the same way, but do something different after. Like there's just, it's all about that journey, as we were saying earlier, like that healing is a journey and it's not like now I've worked on this and it's all going to be okay. Like it is, but
Right.
it's kind of the next time it happens, how are you going to navigate it? And that's when taking all the tools, everything you've learned, all the books and podcasts you've listened to, all the programs you've participated or the therapist you hired, whichever, whatever it is,
hmm
the biggest moment is that when the pattern happens again, when the trigger arises, that
hmm
is the time. And it's like, okay, now what? Now, how can I take everything I've learned and utilize it? How can I shift it? Whether you react in the moment or you don't, however it goes, right? And I think that that's the beauty of the journey of healing. And that's when you know the minute you become more aware or the minute you react differently, the minute you shift, the minute you feel differently towards the trigger,
hmm
and you're like, oh shit, I am healing,
It's
right?
happening.
It's happening. It's working.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that totally. And I think too, in these moments of triggers or contraction, or maybe we feel like we're going backwards or something like that, there's also so much wisdom to be found. Like, I mean, like if you just look back on your life, like the challenges you went through, or, maybe when you didn't show up the way you wanted to, there is so much wisdom in that. Like, we can learn so much from our mistakes, from our challenges, from yeah, just all the things that we go through. So I really love to see everything as an opportunity to, yeah, to drop deeper into love, to learn, to grow, and to know that, yeah, nobody's perfect. It's all, like you said, a journey of learning and evolution and love.
We're, we're human. And we're all doing our very best every day, right?
hmm
And I think that the compassion, when we have that compassion for ourselves, then there is more compassion for everybody else. And I strongly believe that the more I've worked on myself, the more I begin to understand even just strangers, not just friends. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You don't know why they're upset or why they got triggered. You don't know
Yeah.
the stranger who's speeding on the highway, why they're speeding on the highway.
Mm.
There's like you don't know what's actually going on in people's
Yeah.
lives. And we like to assume of like, oh, that person did something wrong and judgment and put judgment towards people. But in reality, we don't know what's going on. We don't know anything. Like there could be the guy who's speeding on the highway maybe has someone who's on their last few breaths in the hospital
Mm.
and they're trying
Yeah.
to get there, right? The friend who didn't call you the day they said they would. Well, maybe they were going through something that day. Maybe
Mhm.
something happened. Maybe they were triggered in their own old stories and trauma that they didn't have the capacity to call you. And I think
Yeah.
that sometimes like we expect everybody to be like us. We want people to be like us because we're like, well, this is how I would handle a situation. But not
Mhm.
everybody is us. And so I think that that is kind of like the beauty, and the beauty of like bringing it back to like breath work is that as you unlock, I feel like in those sessions, as you unlock more and more and you come back more to your body, you find that compassion within you. And so can you speak a little bit deeper about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And compassion is so important. And like you said, we really never know what people are navigating. And it really is such an intense time on our planet in this moment. And people are triggered and they don't feel safe in their nervous system. And when we don't feel safe, that causes us to lash out and react in unhealthy ways. And yeah, compassion is so important. And I've really been noticing, even just within my own life, how the power of compassion, like you were saying, like it really does come from this place of having compassion within and self-love within. It's also so much healthier for us to have compassion for other people. Of course, it's like cultivated within first, but if you think about it, like if you're judging someone, if you're mad at someone, if you're projecting a bunch of stuff on someone or like ill will, all of that negative energy has to come through your mind and your consciousness and your heart and your body first. So first, it's poison for you before it's even being projected onto this situation or this other person. So to really be able to stay in unconditional love and compassion, and rather than judging someone, being curious, opening yourself to understand where they're coming from, what may be happening, is really how I like to approach things. Yeah, I think through the process of breath work, we are peeling back these layers of conditioning, of trauma, connecting to these pieces and these parts of ourselves that oftentimes are needing our love because they have been shamed, they have been wronged by society, by our family, by our parents. So these are parts of ourselves we haven't learned to accept. So yes, when they come up and we learn to love them and we develop compassion for them, of course that like ripples out onto everybody else as well. So like our healing through these processes is not just for ourselves, but for all of humanity, for all our relations, for our family. I mean, like, yeah, my breathwork practice has totally brought so much awareness into my relationship patterns and also family dynamics and things and helped me show up in such a different way, which has been really, really powerful. And yeah, that's a big one is unlocking and getting to see journeying back through our family dynamics and the inner child healing and getting to see where is that showing up in the kind of relationships that I'm manifesting and creating in my life because I think so much of relationship work is inner child work as well and is about having compassion and understanding and curiosity and for if you're in a relationship, your partner's inner child too, because most of the time like you said, someone's triggered, they're reacting in a certain way, it's probably from something from the past, something that happened when they were 5 years old. So when we have this awareness of our own parts and pieces in psyche and how that shows up, we also begin to see it in others and we're like, oh, and then it's not as much of like a war of you're wrong and you're attacking me or why are you, behaving in this way? Like it should be better. It's like, oh wow, like, you must be really struggling, you must be really hurting, there must really be something there that needs love and compassion. Yeah.
Yeah, we are all like relationships, like even friendships, family dynamics, all levels of relationship is gives us like that one little thing to dive deeper into ourselves because
Mhm.
that is how most big like I would say like bigger triggers happen. Like obviously we get triggered from society, we get triggered through what we see on the news and social media and whatnot. But the ones that like where we want to make the shift, where we see there's a big shift is when it is a relationship for people we really care about. And so our family, our friends, our partners, like that is like, and so taking those moments when you see, as you said, like whether they get upset about something or you get upset about something, it's getting curious and be like, wait, I know for myself, this is sometimes a practice I like to use is why am I upset? And is this something that, did they actually do something wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it what they did that I'm just upset about it because it's bringing up something from the past? And I like to kind
Right.
of question this myself, like, do I need to set a boundary or is there something I need to look within? And
Mm.
asking these questions to yourself, you know the answer. You always know the answer because sometimes it's not so much of like what they did is actually wrong. Like if you can pull yourself out of the situation and see like did they actually what they said, was it actually mean? Like was it actually, or did they just say it and you
Mm-hmm.
took it the wrong way? And it's kind of like pulling yourself out of that, out of the situation, kind of trying to see it in the bigger picture. Now, this can ha only happen once you process the trigger right through the emotions. I think that it's a little bit difficult to kind of pull yourself out of that zoomed in, like when you're zoomed in on it, when you are in a high state of emotions or your nervous system is out of whack.
Right.
But
It's like
once
tunnel vision.
yeah, yeah. But once you process it, once you ride the wave and you pull out, you can be like, oh wait, like they didn't say anything wrong. Like they didn't like for example, especially if it's something like an opinion
Mm.
and they
Yeah.
expressed an opinion and you got upset by the opinion. Like that's their opinion. Why did you
Right.
get upset about the opinion?
Yes.
And what is that saying? Like, is it because you want everybody to agree with you? Is it because you want everybody to be like you? Is it because it's out of your control and you like to have be in control of things? And then you can go even deeper than that. Was there a time where someone disagreed with you in the past and it
Mm-hmm.
created a negative outcome?
Mm-hmm.
Like they disagreed with you and then it ended the friendship, it ended the relationship, or you were ridiculed, you were bullied. Like all these little things, like they stem from somewhere deeper. And
Mm-hmm.
a trigger is just the emotions we feel in the trigger is basically an emotion we've once felt before.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of those like emotions or thought forms or triggers, I feel like oftentimes like are coming from that place of fear. Like you said, like, oh, did this happen in the past? And like I lost this person, or like fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of, yeah, not being liked or loved or accepted. Also, life is so intelligent. Like I love that you're saying, was it just an opinion? And I took it personally or something like that. Because life is so divinely intelligent that, these things that are unresolved, these emotions that we haven't fully felt, these triggers in the nervous system, even these beliefs in the mind or these things in our energy field that are unresolved, that are still hanging out, that aren't fully aligned with the truth of love. It's like life brings these mirrors, these people, these situations, these relationships to to us to trigger those things for the purpose of our healing and our evolution so that we can let them go. So it's like when these things come up, sure, maybe they feel inconvenient, but really it's for the purpose of healing and release. So what an incredible gift that this person is triggering you. And once we get to the other side of it, we get to see, wow, most of the time, everyone is innocent, which is really beautiful most of the time. People are just living life. They're being themselves, and if it's igniting something within us, if it's triggering something within, we get to look within and say, oh, what is that? And then have gratitude for being brought into our awareness because we get to release it and we get to return to love and release the burden of that story or that wounding or that trauma and come back into alignment with who we really are. So really these triggers I feel like are a gift, even if they come in the most inconvenient moment, they're uncomfortable, it's challenging, it's oftentimes it can be really, really painful to feel these things again. But we have to, yeah, feel them until they are fully felt and held in the light of love and transmuted. And that's why I think a lot of people come to breath work because they are seeing like, oh, like I am getting triggered and maybe it's not actually about the situation or this person, and they're actually ready to look at, okay, so what is it for me? What happened in the past? What needs my love and attention and compassion, and how do I show up in a better way? How do I shift my mindset? Because yeah, life is gonna keep bringing us the same people, the same relationships in different forms until we really learn those lessons and integrate them and yeah, choose to live in alignment with truth. And our triggers, while they are true in that moment in our body, like you said, are usually from the past. Yeah, it's just pain. It's just pain that needs love.
I love that you mentioned that people come to breath work because they're ready to see it differently. They're ready to go and see what it is that caused that trigger. Because
Mm.
here's the thing, like there's two major things when it comes to like inner child healing that I love to explain to people is that a lot of times because some people have told me they're like, oh, I don't have major trauma. I don't need inner child healing. And I'm like, that's
Surprise.
not what it always is about. Like, yes, like
Yeah.
you can have people can have major trauma, and sometimes it is suppressed and it's like mentally blocked, like forgotten, but not forgotten. Like just it was so traumatic that they've like erased that memory. I
Hmm.
do believe that that is there. But then there's also the in inner child that it's a lot of the things that as adults we would say it's minor, that it's not
Hmm.
trauma and it's super minor. It's that one thing someone said to you or that situation that happened to you where at that moment in time, at that young age of 5 or 6, is your childlike self did not understand what was happening, so it
Yeah.
created a story.
Hmm.
And whatever that story was. So I like to use this example like of myself that, there was back when I was in grade 1, first year of elementary school, I had my birthday party. My mom invited the entire class, like 30 kids, and only one showed up. And at
Oh.
that moment, I didn't understand. I didn't know why the other kids didn't show up. Who knows what was happening on the other side of each and every one of those stories. But in that moment, I told myself that I was worthy of friends. And then I
Oh.
struggle with friendships throughout my life, and I'm getting better, and it's something that is in the process of healing. But if I would look at like my adult version of myself, like obviously now I have more compassion for the younger Julie, but initially you're like, well, it was just like that one birthday party. You had other birthday
Hmm.
parties where people showed up. You had other really good birthday parties where all your friends came. So like, why are you hung up on this one, right? And so
Right.
that is like so that sometimes what happens is that we talk to that inner child, that younger version of ourselves that way, and we say it's not a big deal. So I love that breath work brings in kind of focuses on those moments and says like, no, this is the moment, and how can you be
Yeah.
compassion for that younger version of you, even though your adult self may see it as not a big deal.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, it's such a powerful example and it's so true. And I really feel like however deep we can go and how much love we can bring to those parts in our inner child is also like how successful we can be in the world because it's like what you're saying, like that belief from that time, if you don't tend to that, it's like oh, I like, how do I have friends then, you know? But you're aware of it and then you're like loving it. And then there's like a new way, there's a new pathway open. You're not stuck in that age, you know? And yeah, the breathwork is great for bringing those memories up. And one of my favorite questions to ask people in those moments when those memories are coming up is like, what would you have needed in that moment? You know, because a lot of times also like our needs weren't met, and that's traumatic. And again, like you said, the adult can be like, yeah, well, it was fine, and you know, I'm here now, and it's okay, and I should just get over it. And it's like, no, actually, it matters. It matters a lot. And yeah, so tuning into like what would we have needed in that moment, and how would that have shifted things? And so now, when that feeling or that belief or that thought comes up, what would we have needed, and can we give it to ourselves now? Can we rewrite the story now and kind of like collapse that old timeline? Yeah.
Exactly. Because like, and I love that you brought up like, what did I need in that moment? Because, and it's not saying there's anything wrong with like the people who raised us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Parents, grandparents, everybody did their very best. But one of the common things was, the crying,
Mm-hmm.
right? How many times have you been like, oh, please don't cry? Like, it's okay, it's okay. And then it's like you stop that emotion from being released. And
Mm-hmm.
that need of being held, need
Yes.
of someone holding those emotions for you at that young age was not met. It's very interesting, and so it's like who knows what was happening in our parents' lives at that moment that they just couldn't hold that. They could have been exhausted. They could have been going through their own stuff as well. But
Yeah.
that simple, it's so small. I want to say the adult version is saying it's so small, but it's so powerful. And those emotions that all got stopped in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
When you get hurt, you fall, you scratch your knee, and you start crying, and it's like, no, 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 shh, it's okay. You don't need to cry, like anything to stop that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, well, where is that gonna go?
Yeah. And it does, it gets stuck in our body and it blocks our creativity and like the flow of our chi and our life force energy. And I even love that you're like using this example of like shushing, because this is like the one thing I'm like, I would never do in a session because that can be like so triggering for someone because that's what happens, right? And yeah, oftentimes I feel like I'm like being like the parent or the person that the person didn't have, because it's like those emotions are finally coming up and someone is there to witness them and be present and love them. Like you said, like we didn't have, which is essentially how we heal. We need to be witnessed and loved, you know, oftentimes in those places that are carrying shame and pain for having the emotion in the first place, which is like so silly. It's just like how we've been taught to function in the world, like, you know, shut it down, be strong, make it through, where really, and this was one of the most powerful things for me in my training was realizing that my sensitivity and my vulnerability and my ability to feel at great depths was actually an incredible gift. Yeah, but before that, like I had been a very sensitive child and very much shamed for, you know, all of my tears and just yeah, being emotional, being sensitive. And through the process of the breathwork training, I came back into my body and I got to realize that, oh, this is normal. There was never anything wrong with me. I'm a human being. I have emotions. And what a gift to feel so deeply and to be alive and to experience the totality of the human experience, which is all the things, you know, the sadness, the happiness, the joy, the bliss, the grief. I think making peace with being able to feel all of it is really what helps us feel more whole and authentic.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And I think that's just such a beautiful way to wrap this episode because you just ended it so beautifully. And so, Dani, I want to thank you so, so much for coming on this podcast and having this conversation with me because I love talking about all these things all the time. And so, for people who want to connect with you, how can they find you? How can they connect with you?
Yeah. So thank you so much, Julie, for having me. This has been so much fun and so fun to just share with somebody who gets it, who works in these realms as well. So thank you. And for connecting with me, you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is at Dani, Danim, Rhem, Rhem. And I'm sure there will be links for these things as well. And my Facebook page, Dani Rhem dash Embracing the Mystery, where I usually do lives. I'll just share some writing, some content, different things to support you on your journey. And then I have a website, danirhem.com. You can find out more about the breathwork there, book a session if you'd like. And yeah, I think that's it, actually.
Amazing. And that is for those who are listening. If you are driving or doing things, they will be found and they would be in the show notes. So you can connect with Dani. Love her energy. She's just such a calm, a beautiful energy. And I highly recommend for you to connect with her. So thank you again, Dani. And thank you for all those who are listening. If you enjoy this podcast, feel free to like, share, subscribe, and I will catch you all next time.